Michael Jennings, a solitary history teacher, awakens to find himself the only one moving amidst a city of statues, haunted by whispers of a life unlived. He confronts eerie, shadowy figures, manifestations of his deepest regrets and unfulfilled dreams. As reality and nightmare intertwine, Michael is forced to face the truths he's long hidden from. What is the mystery behind this frozen world? And can Michael find redemption and change his fate before it's too late? Dive into a tale where time stands still, but choices can change everything. Chapter 1. The Frozen Dawn. The morning sun broke through the curtains, casting a muted glow across the bedroom where Michael Jennings lay asleep. The digital clock on his bedside table blinked 7:03 a.m., frozen in time. Michael, a 35-year-old history teacher with a penchant for routine, stirred awake to an uncanny silence. The usual sounds of the bustling city were absent, replaced by an eerie stillness. Rubbing his eyes, Michael swung his legs off the bed. The floor felt unusually cold under his feet. He walked to the window, drawing the curtains fully. The sight that greeted him was surreal. The city outside was motionless. People on the street were frozen mid-step. A bird hung in the air, wings spread but not beating, and cars stood still, their occupants suspended in a moment. Confusion furrowed his brow. He thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a dream that lingered a bit too long. Shaking his head, he decided to step outside for a clearer picture. Dressing quickly, he grabbed his coat and keys and left his apartment. The hallway of his building was as still as a photograph. Mrs. Henderson, his elderly neighbour, was frozen in time, her small dog Charlie suspended in mid-air as it leapt to greet her. The elevator's digital display was stuck, the doors ajar. Opting for the stairs, Michael descended into the lobby. Outside, the world was a tableau of suspended life. A coffee cup was caught in an eternal fall from a businessman's hand, a drop of coffee perpetually hanging in the air. A taxi driver was fixed, mid-honk, his expression a mix of frustration and surprise as Michael walked down the street, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He passed by the local bakery, where Mrs. Flynn was frozen behind the counter, a warm smile forever etched on her face. The pastries in the display window were motionless, not a single crumb falling from the perfectly still croissants. He moved closer to observe a street performer who was stuck in an impressive pose. One leg bounced in the air. It was as if the entire world was a gallery of living statues. As Michael continued his surreal journey through the city, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He turned around abruptly, half expecting someone to be moving behind him, but everything remained still. The only movement was his own. The only sound, his breathing and footsteps. The realization began to sink in. The world had stopped, but he had not. A chill ran down his spine, not from the cold, but from the creeping fear of the unknown. Why was he the only one moving? What had happened to the world? Lost in his thoughts, Michael barely noticed the faint whispers at first. They were barely audible, like the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. He stopped, listening intently. The whispers seemed to emanate from the frozen figures around him, a chorus of unheard voices trapped in the stillness. Panic and curiosity warred within him. He wanted to run back to his apartment, to hide from this impossible reality, yet something compelled him to stay, to listen, to try and understand the whispers of the frozen. Chapter 2. Reflections in Stillness. Michael sat down on a cold metal bench in the heart of the city park, the frozen tableau of life around him mirroring the solitude he had always known. As a history teacher, his world had revolved around books and research, realms where he felt most at ease, away from the complexities and demands of human interactions. He was an introvert by nature, finding solace in the quiet company of historical texts rather than the bustling crowds of the living. The stillness that surrounded him now was not entirely alien. Throughout his life, Michael had often felt like an observer, watching life happen around him, but never fully participating. He was more at home amidst the dusty shelves of libraries than at social gatherings. In conversations, he stumbled over words, his thoughts tangled like the intricate script of an ancient manuscript. His shyness and introversion had cost him dearly in the realm of personal relationships. He remembered Sarah, the one woman who had managed to breach the walls of his solitary fortress. She had loved him, but she also craved emotional expression and social interaction, things Michael struggled to provide. When she told him she had found someone else, someone who could be present with her in ways he couldn't, Michael had let her go without protest. His heart had ached, but his voice had remained silent, just as silent as the world around him now. Looking around at the motionless figures, he realized how this frozen world was an exaggerated reflection of his own life. The people around him, forever paused mid-action, were like the characters in the historical accounts he read, alive in a sense, but unreachable, trapped within their own moments. He had always felt disconnected, a spectator in a world that moved around him in a blur, their lives a series of events he observed, but rarely influenced. The silence of the city was a physical manifestation of the loneliness that had been his constant companion. The stillness of the world mirrored the stillness in his heart, a place where emotions were felt but rarely expressed, where connections were yearned for but never fully formed. The frozen world was a stark reminder of the distance he had always felt from others, a gap he had never been able to bridge. As Michael sat there, lost in thought, the whispers of the frozen city began to weave around him again, soft and insistent. They were like echoes of conversations he had never had, the silent words of a life he had observed but never fully lived. And in that moment, he felt an unexpected connection to these still figures, a shared sense of isolation that transcended the barrier of time. Chapter 3. Echoes of Regret. Michael began to walk again, weaving through the statuesque figures that dotted the cityscape. Each step he took was accompanied by the eerie whispers that seemed to emanate from the motionless people around him. He realized, with a growing sense of unease, that whenever he averted his gaze from these frozen forms, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The whispers were not just random murmurs, but seemed to be carrying a message, a litany of what might have been. They spoke of opportunities missed, of chances not taken. They echoed with the regrets of his past, telling him of the moments he should have fought for more in his life. As Michael passed a group of children, frozen in a game of tag, he remembered the bullies of his school years. The whispers chastised him for not standing up to them, for retreating into his books and history, into worlds long gone, instead of confronting the present. They spoke of a philosophy where one's life is measured not by avoidance, but by the pursuit of personal values and achievements. He moved through the streets, each whisper a reminder of his passive approach to life. In relationships, he had always been the one to step back, to avoid conflict, to concede. The whispers seemed to be urging him towards a different path, one where he might have stood up for himself, where he might have reached out for what he truly desired. The philosophy carried by these whispers spoke of a life lived for oneself, for the individual's pursuit of happiness and fulfillment. It was a call to be all that one can be, to strive for the best within oneself. The frozen figures, with their unfulfilled actions and suspended lives, served as a stark reminder of the consequences of not reaching for one's potential, of allowing fear and doubt to dictate one's choices. Among the motionless crowds, Michael passed by a street artist, her brush suspended above a canvas that would never be completed. The scene struck him deeply, a symbol of unexpressed creativity, of art unfulfilled. It was a poignant reflection of his own life, where he had often chosen the safety of observation over the risk of participation. As he continued his solitary journey through the whispering city, Michael began to feel a growing resolve. The voices, though born of regret, were also offering a message of hope. It was not too late to change, to start living not just in the pages of history, but in the vibrant, challenging, and unpredictable story of his own life. Chapter 4. The Lurking Shadow. Michael's journey through the frozen city took a sinister turn as he began to notice something unsettling. It started as a fleeting movement in the corner of his eye, a mere wisp of darkness that vanished as soon as he turned to look. But as he continued to navigate the motionless streets, the presence grew more tangible, more ominous. Each time he passed the still figures, he felt a growing sense of dread. It was as if something was lurking just beyond his field of vision, a shadow that slithered and shifted behind the frozen people and objects. The first few times, he dismissed it as a trick of the light or a figment of his imagination, but the shadow persisted, growing bolder with each sighting. Michael's heart began to race. The whispers of regret that had followed him were now drowned out by a more immediate fear. This wasn't just a reflection of his past failings. It was a real, tangible threat. The shadow seemed to be playing a macabre game of cat and mouse, always just out of sight, but undeniably there. The air around him felt colder, charged with a malevolent energy. He tried to convince himself to remain calm, to rationalize what he was seeing, but the primal part of his brain screamed danger. He quickened his pace, glancing over his shoulder, only to catch the briefest glimpse of the shadow darting behind a frozen busker, its form humanoid but distorted, as if made of smoke and darkness. Michael's steps became more erratic, his breath shallow. Every rustle, every shift in the air made him jump. The once silent city now felt oppressively loud with his pounding heartbeat. He turned down an alley, hoping to lose the shadow, but as he glanced back, he saw it. Closer this time, almost tangible. A dark figure shrouded in mystery and terror. His mind raced with thoughts of what this entity could be. Was it a manifestation of his own fears? A product of the strange phenomenon that had stopped time? Or was it something more sinister? A predator stalking him through this frozen wasteland? The shadow seemed to flicker with each of his movements, as if it was reacting to him, feeding off his fear. The narrow alley walls felt like they were closing in on him. The silence, now a suffocating void, filled only by the soft, skittering sound of the shadow's movement. Michael stumbled out of the alley, his breath ragged with fear. He looked back one last time, expecting to see the shadow in full pursuit, but it was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. The relief he felt was short-lived, replaced by an unshakable sense of foreboding. The shadow was still out there, somewhere in the frozen city, waiting, watching, and Michael knew with a chilling certainty that this was not the last he would see of it. Chapter 5. The Shadows of Might Have Been. Michael's heart skipped a beat as he turned to face the shadow. It was no longer an indistinct form lurking in the background, but had taken on a familiar shape. Standing before him was another version of himself, an eerie doppelganger that mirrored his every feature. "Hello, Michael." The shadow spoke with a voice that was hauntingly his own. "Who are you?" Michael asked, his voice trembling. "I am you," the shadow replied. "Just a version that should have been you." The shadow's eyes held a depth of sadness and accusation. "I am the ghost of all the things you should have been, by hiding away and shying away from the world. The goals and dreams you had were never born. I am the Michael that was never allowed to exist. The shadow's eyes began to well with tears, a bizarre sight on the familiar face. Then the sadness morphed into anger. You denied me life, it said, its voice rising in a crescendo of fury and pain. You kept us all in the dark, buried under your fears and doubts. As these words echoed in the still air, other shadows began to emerge around them. They were the manifestations of Michael's unfulfilled dreams and aspirations, each one a path he had never taken, a choice he had never made. There was a Michael who was a confident public speaker, another who was an adventurous traveller, and yet another who was a loving partner. These shadows moved with a purpose, their expressions a mix of sorrow and anger. They began to circle around Michael, their presence overwhelming. The air was thick with the weight of unfulfilled potential, of lives that could have been lived but were instead lost to fear and inaction. You kept us hidden, one shadow accused. You never let us see the light. We could have been so much, another lamented. Their movements became faster, more frantic, as if they were trying to escape the confines of the world Michael had limited them to. The circle around him tightened, their voices growing louder, a cacophony of what-ifs and if-onlys. Michael, in the center of this storm of lost chances, felt a panic rising in him. He wanted to run, to escape these accusing figures, but he knew there was no outrunning the truth they represented. These were the parts of himself he had suppressed, the dreams he had let wither in the shadows of his fears. As the shadows closed in, Michael realized that this confrontation was inevitable. He had to face the parts of himself he had neglected, the potential he had ignored. The chase was not just a pursuit, it was a call to action, for him to finally live the life he had always been capable of, but had never dared to embrace. Chapter 6. Awakening. Michael collapsed to the ground, his breaths coming in short, ragged gasps as the shadows of his unrealized dreams towered over him. Their voices merged into a single, damning chorus, scolding and cursing him. You could have given us life, but now we must die with you, they cried. Their forms looming closer, their anger palpable. Just as they seemed about to engulf him, Michael's world erupted into blinding light, and he felt himself being pulled from the grasp of the shadows. He awoke with a start, gasping for air, his body drenched in sweat. The sterile white of a hospital room replaced the dark, frozen streets of his nightmare. His heart still racing, he tried to make sense of his surroundings. Machines beeped rhythmically beside him, and IV lines snaked into his arm. It took him a moment to gather his bearings. A nurse, noticing his sudden awakening, hurried over. Mr. Jennings, you're awake. You've been in a coma for 3 months, she explained, her voice a mixture of surprise and relief. 3 months. The words echoed in Michael's mind. He struggled to recall what had happened. The nurse, sensing his confusion, gently filled in the blanks. You were in a car accident. It was quite serious. You've been here, in and out of consciousness, but mostly unresponsive until now. The memories slowly started to trickle back to him. The rainy night, the slick roads, the sudden, blinding headlights of an oncoming vehicle. It had all led to this, to a coma that locked him away in a world of his own subconscious, a world where his deepest regrets and unfulfilled dreams had manifested into haunting, accusatory shadows. The realization hit Michael with the weight of all the missed opportunities and unfulfilled potential he had just experienced in his dream. The shadows, as terrifying as they had been, were a stark reflection of his innermost fears and regrets. They were the embodiment of everything he could have been, everything he had not allowed himself to be. Lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by the hum of medical equipment, Michael felt a profound sense of clarity. The dream, or nightmare, had been a harsh wake-up call, but also a second chance. He had been given the opportunity to confront the parts of himself he had long neglected, the dreams he had let wither in the shadows of his fears and insecurities. As he lay there, contemplating his unexpected journey through the realms of his own mind, Michael made a silent vow. If he were to truly awaken from this, if he were to walk out of this hospital, he would live differently. He would no longer let fear dictate his choices. He would no longer hide behind the safety of his books and routine. He would give life to those dreams and aspirations that had for so long been mere shadows in his mind. The journey ahead would not be easy, he knew. It would require courage and effort to step out of the comfort zone he had built around himself. But as he lay there, slowly recovering from the physical and emotional ordeal, Michael felt a budding sense of hope. The shadows had been a part of him, a call to action from his own soul. Now it was time to answer that call. Final chapter, Shadows Fulfilled. A few years had passed since the incident that had irrevocably changed Michael Jennings' life. Standing on a bustling city street, he was a different man from the one who had once walked these streets alone, haunted by the shadows of unfulfilled dreams. Beside him stood his wife, Sarah, her hand clasped in his. They shared a comfortable silence, the kind that speaks of deep understanding and shared experiences. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow on their faces, and Michael's eyes crinkled in a genuine, contented smile. It was a smile that spoke of battles fought and won, of fears faced and overcome. As they strolled leisurely, Michael's gaze momentarily drifted to the shadows cast by the setting sun. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, he saw them, the shadows of himself that he had once encountered in his coma-induced dream. But they were different now. Instead of the accusatory, pained expressions of the past, these shadows smiled back at him, a look of approval and satisfaction in their eyes. One of them winked, as if acknowledging the journey he had made, the life he had dared to embrace. Then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the shadows vanished, melting away into the golden light of the setting sun. Michael's smile deepened, a sense of peace settling in his heart. He turned to Sarah, squeezing her hand gently, and saw in her eyes a reflection of his own happiness and fulfillment. That moment encapsulated the incredible journey Michael had embarked upon. He had confronted his deepest fears, challenged the constraints he had placed on himself, and emerged not just surviving, but thriving. He had given life to the dreams he had once thought impossible to achieve. In doing so, he had not only found personal fulfillment, but also love and companionship, something he had once thought permanently elusive. As Michael and Sarah continued their walk, the city around them buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the frozen world of his past. He realized that the world had always been alive, vibrant, and waiting. It was he who had been frozen in time, trapped by his own fears and doubts. But now he was an active participant in the dance of life, no longer a mere spectator. The shadows of what might have been had faded, replaced by the tangible reality of what was. And as the couple disappeared into the bustling crowd, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the city, it was clear that Michael Jennings had finally found his place in the world, a world that was no longer shadowed by the past, but illuminated by the possibilities of the present and the promise of the future.